for this body of knowledge research project, I chose 6 podcasts two from within the local regions, statewide regions, and national regions within Colorado, and then nationally, of course. But those 6 podcasts were within the sports media industry, all talking about either a variety of sports, a couple of different ones, or just sticking to one sport or one team within that project. And what I found out and what I really wanted to learn from this project was what makes those podcasts stand out, what makes them really have that appeal to their audience, and why. And what I found out is that it is the host's interviewing skills, the quality of research that is done prior to the episode, and then the podcast energy. And what I mean by podcast energy is the interactions that you have with the host, the guest, or hosts and guests, and really kind of that feel, whether you're a high energy person, moderate, or low energy, what kind of feel do you bring to the podcast, and how does it kind of interact and expand the audience that you're trying to look for. So for this project, I chose the Jim Davis Show, locally, the Jim Davis Show, All Colorado Everything Sports Podcast, which are both produced and edited and distributed out of Grand Junction, and then it's put onto major apps like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, some of those other smaller ones as well. Statewide, I looked at the DNVR Denver Nuggets podcast and then the Locked On Broncos podcast, which obviously from the name focus on just one team within the Colorado sports realm, and really use their audience to draw people not only from Colorado but across the nation that are interested in that same kind of team, because the NBA and NFL are very global and national sports within the United States. And then the national level podcasts I chose were the Pat McAfee Show and the Old Man and the Three. Both of those podcasts are run by former professional athletes. Pat McAfee was a punter for the Indianapolis Colts, and then JJ Redick runs the Old Man and the Three. He played for a fair amount of teams in the NBA. But those are the 6 podcasts that I chose, and each of them I found had at least 2 of those aspects of quality research, podcast energy, and then the interviewing skills. Every podcast had at least 2 of the 3 skills, and some of them, like Pat McAfee, had all 3. He's got great interviewing skills. He does a good amount of research, and even if he doesn't, you can tell that he knows enough about the product or person to have a quality conversation, a high quality conversation. And then he's a very high energy personality, to say the least. But some of like the local podcasts like Jim Davis Show and All Colorado Everything, they have the interviewing skills. The energy kind of is lackluster at times, but they do a lot of research and they produce quality content. And then statewide, DNVR has all 3. The DNVR Denver Nuggets podcast has all 3 of those aspects, whether it's interviewing skills. They do a great job interviewing former players or coaches, like George Karl joins them fairly regularly for interviews, and then just general conversation. And then the energy that they have between their 3 to 4 co-hosts is electric. It makes for a really dynamic listen. And then the Locked On Broncos podcast has moderate energy hosts, but you can tell that the passion is truly there from the both of them. And to me, that makes a high quality, high energy podcast. They do a ton of research. They're really, really good. And then when they do have interviews and interview guests, they're also very, very high quality. But yeah, those were the 6 podcasts that I looked at, both locally, statewide, and then nationally within the sports industry, and kind of discovering what makes them stand out from the rest of the oversaturated industry that the sports world is.